You do realize that the Minions aren't evil anymore by the fourth Despicable Me movie. And there's a scene where we can catch a female Minion, and a scene in the second movie where they practically destroy a Pixar character. Watching the 7 movies in the franchise isn't enough to notice these things. That's why we're going to be revealing up to 30 things that no one knows about the Minions. Grab your popcorn and hit that subscribe button because you're going to become an expert on all things Minions by the end of this video. Starting off with detail number 1, have you ever noticed how the Minions' outfits change depending on who they serve? Go back through their history and you'll notice how every new boss comes with a new dress code. When they're serving a caveman, they're dressed in rough, brown, primitive clothes, looking like they've been living in the Stone Age their entire lives. Then they end up serving a giant Cyclops and their clothes change again to fit the whole prehistoric monster setup. After that, they serve a wizard, and suddenly the wardrobe gets a medieval upgrade. They're now walking around in tiny black cloaks like miniature henchmen who take their job very seriously. And when Napoleon comes into the picture, these little yellow creatures are suddenly marching around in tiny military uniforms like they've enlisted in the world's least intimidating army. The funny part is that nobody tells them to change. They just seem to understand the assignment. New master, new outfit. New era, new wardrobe. The Minions really said, whatever the boss is wearing, we're matching. Millions of years of loyalty, and apparently not one bad outfit. Now for detail number 2, and this one genuinely had me thinking. At some point, we need to stop calling the Minions lucky and start asking the obvious question. How are these things still alive? These little yellow creatures have apparently been around since prehistoric times, surviving long enough to serve one evil master after another. And somehow, getting hurt barely seems to slow them down. Look at the rise of Gru. When Master Chow starts training them in Kung Fu, the Minions get thrown into some seriously brutal exercises. They're knocked around, slammed into the floor, and sent flying repeatedly while trying to learn martial arts. Yet somehow, they just keep bouncing back for the next round like their bones didn't even file a complaint. No hospital, no ice pack, no dramatic recovery montage. Nothing. And now we have Minions and Monsters, which takes us all the way back to the 1920s. These guys have been causing problems for an awfully long time before Gru ever enters the picture. Because really, what else explains creatures that can take that kind of punishment and still wake up ready to become somebody else's problem? At this point, I'm not saying they're immortal. I'm just saying the evidence is getting suspicious. Detail number 3 made me do a double take. Remember when the Minions accidentally wiped out Napoleon, got chased away, and basically went into hiding inside an icy cave? Well, they weren't exactly taking a short vacation. The movie jumps from Napoleon's downfall in the early 1800s all the way to 1968 when Kevin, Stuart, and Bob finally leave the cave. That means the Minions spent well over 150 years trapped inside that frozen hideout. And suddenly, their miserable little faces make a lot more sense. They weren't just bored. They had basically missed an entire era of human history. Generations were born, grew up, and died. Cities changed, technology advanced, and the world kept moving while these little yellow guys were living underground. No internet, no television, no mischief. Just ice, darkness, and each other. Honestly, after more than a century stuck underground, I'd be depressed too. And the funniest part? They eventually leave because they're bored enough to start looking for another villain. Imagine surviving centuries just to say, yeah, we definitely need a new boss. Now, detail number 4 gets really interesting when you put the Minions movies side by side. In 2015 Minions, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob arrive in America in 1968. Where they begin searching for a new villain to serve. Pretty straightforward, right? Except Minions and Monsters introduces another group. James, Henry, Ed, and Dick, who are already in America during the 1920s. That's nearly 50 years earlier, which definitely raises some questions. So did the Minions have separate arrivals? Are these different groups from the same species, with one group showing up decades before Kevin, Stuart, and Bob? The movies haven't clearly established that every Minion travels together, so maybe different groups were simply scattered around the world. Or maybe we found a timeline problem nobody bothered to explain. Nothing around Otto seems to have changed enough to explain it. The camera hasn't suddenly moved somewhere else, and there's no obvious shift in the lighting. Yet somehow, This massive shadow has entered the scene like it was always invited. Unless there's a giant tree just outside the frame that decided to show up fashionably late, something definitely changed between those shots. Otto is already fighting for his life in the mud, while the background is apparently doing its own thing. Maybe it's an animation slip, or maybe the tree simply waited for the perfect dramatic entrance. Detail number 23 is a pretty cool movie reference. When Gru, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob head to the cinema in Minions: The Rise of Gru, keep your eyes on the posters outside. Right there is Jaws. Yep, the shark thriller. And honestly, seeing it there isn't weird at all. Jaws came out in 1975, which fits the time period of the movie, and it was a massive hit. But then the four of them head inside, and if we pay attention to the background, we see another movie poster of Jaws. Now I'm wondering if the animators were deliberately giving it a little spotlight. Secret number 9 is proof that somebody on the Despicable Me 3 animation team is a certified Harrison Ford stan, and they were not being subtle about it. First up, Dr. Nefario spends a chunk of this movie frozen solid in carbonite, which, if you know your Star Wars, is exactly what happened to Han Solo in Empire Strikes Back. Same pose, same vibe, same everything. They basically copy-pasted one of the most iconic frames in movie history onto an old man in a lab coat. Then later in the same film, the Minions put together this whole highlight reel montage flexing Gru's greatest villain moments. And buried in there is a shot of him stealing a golden idol that is 100% the same idol Indiana Jones goes after at the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Booby traps and everything basically implied. So in one movie, we got Han Solo and Indiana Jones Easter eggs, which means somewhere in that studio, there was a guy who just really needed everyone to know he loves Harrison Ford. Mission accomplished, I guess. Secret number 10. Apparently prison is just a stage waiting to happen if you are a minion. In Despicable Me 3, the boys end up locked up for a bit, and instead of doing anything a normal inmate would do, they turned the entire cell block into a full-blown musical. The dance numbers are not random either. They are straight up doing an Elvis jailhouse rock homage, snapping and strutting like they are auditioning for a 50s jukebox movie. Then it switches gears and they start doing the shark sidestep from West Side Story. Gang choreography and everything, except the gang is a bunch of one-eyed guys in prison jumpsuits. Meanwhile, every actual human prisoner in that scene is just standing there watching this happen with zero explanation given. Nobody asks why the tiny yellow guys know professional choreography. Nobody questions how they learned the exact steps from 2 different classic movies. They just accept it and move on. Genuinely, if I got sent to prison and my cellmates pulled this off, I think I would just let it happen too. Content is content. Secret number 12. Illumination really said, why make one movie when you can advertise 2 at once? In Despicable Me 3, the Minions sneak onto a Hollywood studio lot, and instead of landing on some random set, they stumble directly onto the stage for a singing competition show called, wait for it, Sing. Yes, that Sing. The actual other Illumination movie that came out around the same time. They did not even try to disguise it as a different fake talent show. They just used the real title and let the Minions wander through it like a live commercial break stapled into the middle of an unrelated film. It is honestly kind of impressive how shameless this is. Marvel hides their Easter eggs in post-credit scenes. Illumination just walks their mascots straight through the actual set of their other product and calls it world building. At some point, I feel like we have to just admit these movies are less about story and more about Illumination finding creative new ways to remind you what else they have in theaters. And somehow it still works on me every time. Secret number 13 might be the most unhinged feedback loop in this entire franchise. So back in 2022, a bunch of teenagers started showing up to Minions: The Rise of Gru in full suits and sunglasses just to cause chaos in theaters. This became the gentle Minions trend, and it got so out of hand that theaters in the UK actually started banning big groups dressed like that. So what does Illumination do with that information? They put it directly into Despicable Me 4. Early in the movie, the Minions roll up to their old villain school and swap their regular overalls for full black suits, ties, and sunglasses before walking in. That is not a coincidence. That is a movie studio watching their own fans cause a scene in real theaters and then writing that exact chaos into the next film as canon. Basically, the fans became the lore. A trend that started as teenagers being unhinged for laughs got turned into an actual wardrobe choice for the main characters. I do not think any other franchise has let the internet write their script for them directly, and I am kinda living for it. Secret number 14, and honestly the most shameless one on this list. In Despicable Me 4-5, minions get turned into the Mega Minions. And if you know your Marvel even a little bit, you are going to clock this instantly as a Fantastic Four cosplay. Dave gets super strength. Jerry can turn into literal rock. Tim gets stretchy arms. Mel shoots a heat ray. Gus can fly. That is Thing, Mr. Fantastic, Human Torch, and Invisible Woman energy split across 5 yellow guys with zero attempt to hide it. The wildest part is the powers do not even feel random. They clearly mapped each ability to whichever minion already had a body type that matched. The stretchy one is lanky, the rock one is stocky. It is almost like somebody storyboarded an actual Marvel movie and then just reskinned it with minions at the last minute. I am not even mad about it, honestly. I would watch a full Mega Minion spin-off in a heartbeat. Illumination really said, we cannot get the license, so we will just build our own knockoff, and somehow it slaps anyway. What makes it funnier is that Scarlet isn't just some random character slapped onto the box. She was one of the biggest villains in their earlier adventure. So while Stewart is out here training to become a kung fu master, he's apparently bringing his former boss along for lunch. Talk about keeping the old boss close. We're 14 details in, and this one absolutely makes no sense. There's something about Gumi's introduction in Millions and Monsters that raises a pretty funny question. James, Henry, and Ed summon him from an ancient spell book belonging to their former wizard master, and Gumi reveals that he's been trapped inside that book for an extremely long time. Then James tells him he's looking for monsters to star in a movie, and Gumi just gets it. No confused stare, no "what's a movie?" No questions about cameras, actors, or why 3 tiny yellow creatures suddenly want monsters on a film set. He immediately understands what James is talking about and even goes along with the plan. But if Gumi has really been sealed inside an ancient book for ages, where did he learn about modern filmmaking? Did the spellbook come with Wi-Fi? Was there a tiny cinema inside those pages? Or did Gumi somehow spend centuries trapped in there keeping up with Hollywood? Because being imprisoned for ages is already rough, but somehow being expected to understand movies immediately is even funnier. You're not gonna believe the 15th one. In Minions: The Rise of Gru, keep an eye on the kids in the background when Otto walks through the neighborhood with the Zodiac Stone. There's a little girl in yellow playing nearby, and at first, nothing seems unusual. Then, a few seconds later, her skin tone apparently decides to switch things up. In the first shot, she has a noticeably darker complexion. A moment later, she's still in the same area, wearing the same yellow outfit, but now her skin is considerably lighter. Nobody changed locations, nobody changed clothes. The lighting hasn't suddenly turned the neighborhood into a different time zone either. So, what happened to her? It almost looks like the animators accidentally swapped her with another version of the same character between shots. And because she's just another kid in the background, you have no reason to stop and question it. Otto is carrying a mystical stone. Obviously, that's where your eyes are supposed to be. Meanwhile, this poor girl apparently changed complexion between cuts and carried on with her day. Now, detail number 16 is a really cool one. Did you notice how the Minions' goggles change as they move through different eras? Go back to Minions 2015. When they first emerge from the ocean, they're already wearing goggles. Except these ones are basically made from seaweed. Then they serve a caveman, and suddenly the goggles get a Stone Age upgrade. They're made from wood, because apparently even prehistoric minions needed eye protection. fast forward to ancient Egypt and things get fancier. Their goggles are now golden because why settle for wood when you can accessorize like royalty? Eventually, we get the modern-looking goggles we recognize today. Same minions, same goggles. Completely different materials depending on the era. They really went from seaweed eyewear to wooden frames to gold before finally settling on the goggles we know. Honestly, their goggles have had more upgrades than some people's phones. And somehow, they've managed to keep the same fashion accessory for millions of years. The 17th one had me asking, wait, where did that go? When Kevin, Stuart, and Bob head to VillainCon in Orlando, Bob is carrying his beloved teddy bear Tim in a bright red and yellow box. They meet a family of villains, the Nelsons, who offer them a ride to Orlando since they're headed there too. But before they get into the Nelson family's car, watch closely. Bob sets the box down on the road, reaches inside, pulls Tim out, and climbs into the car with his teddy. So far, nothing abnormal. Now look back at the road. The box is gone. Not moved, not picked up, not kicked aside. Just gone. Nobody walks over and takes it, and Bob doesn't bring it into the car. 1 second, his little box is sitting right there, and the next shot acts like it never existed. Bob rescued Tim and apparently left the box behind to start a new life. Maybe another minion claimed it off screen. Maybe someone cleaned it up between shots. Or maybe the box saw its purpose fulfilled and clocked out. Honestly, fair enough. Illumination are kind of like new dogs in the animation business. They never really got their big break until Despicable Me. Although they've released several projects since, nothing has been able to quite stick like the Gru-based franchise. I mean, the bad guy turned good has brought in billions for the franchise. And this has Illumination feel like they are one of the top dogs. And with their newfound success after the first movie, they felt they were big enough to throw shots at Pixar. Look at this scene where Lucy is taking Gru to the AVL. Her car turns into a submarine as she plunges underwater. That was quite the spectacle, I can't lie. But did you catch the part where they literally run over a fish? Talk about underwater roadkill. Now, the devil surely is in the detail here because did you catch the fish that just got hit? It's a clownfish, and Lucy only hit one. She was moving so fast that it tore one of its fins clean off. There is no way a fish is surviving that. And those fish? That's supposed to be Nemo and Marlin. What type of message are Illumination sending at Pixar? Hey, I'm not ever one to support petty behavior, but I like where Illumination went with this one. Who said rappers were the only ones who could hide sneak disses in their work? Secret number 6 is something you really need to sit with to understand just how insane it is. When you finish Despicable Me 2, you need to understand that these minions legit signed out on working for Gru because he wasn't being evil enough. I mean, that's why they started working for Gru in the first place. And when they started making jelly instead of plotting world domination, they mentally checked out. Last time I saw protests, these violent labor rights were in question. The funny thing is, these dudes barely get any form of payment. They really just serve Gru for the love of the game. They begged that man to go back to his old ways because they knew that they were low-key, never finding anyone who can match his level of villainy. Okay, real talk now that we're on secret number 7, we have all heard Pierre Coffin say every single minion is male. No exceptions. Scout's honor. But somebody forgot to loop in the costume department because Despicable Me 2 is out here quietly running a full background drag show and literally nobody talks about it. Pause any random crowd scene in this movie and you will catch a minion serving looks Gru definitely did not approve in the budget. We got one in a grass skirt with an actual shell bra situation happening. We got a full French maid outfit just casually existing in the frame. Somebody decided dress and pigtails was the move and committed. And then my personal favorite, a whole Carmen Miranda fruit hat. Like this one Minion is 2 seconds from headlining a cruise ship variety show. The wildest part is that nobody in the actual movie reacts. Gru is over here trying to stop a secret supervillain, and meanwhile, his own henchmen are having full-on Fashion Week 2 feet behind him, and everybody just lets it happen. Honestly, respect. These yellow little guys decided gender was a Tuesday problem before that was even a whole online discourse. And I kind of love the confidence for them. If you thought product placement was just a thing brands paid for, wait until I tell you all about secret number 8. Illumination has been advertising their own movies on a literal child for 3 films straight and calling it a costume choice. In the first Despicable Me, Margot wears a Lorax shirt. Cute, subtle, whatever. In the second one, she is wearing a shirt with a character from Bayside Shakedown because apparently Illumination had a deal with a Japanese TV network at the time. And then in Despicable Me 3, she shows up in a full Grinch shirt, months before Illumination dropped their own Grinch movie in theaters. Honestly, this next one is pretty ridiculous if you stop to think about it. When James, Henry, and Ed summon the Green Monster for their movie using their old Wizard Master spellbook, he introduces himself with a name that's almost longer than the spell they just used. Gary, Orcam, Oliver, Magma, Ichabod, the Deceiver. Now, take the first letter of each name. Goomi. Goomy. So the minions were basically handed the monster's nickname right from the start, and somehow none of them thought to question the Deceiver part. Because seriously, imagine meeting someone who introduces himself as Gary, Orcam, Oliver, Magma, Ichabod, the Deceiver, and thinking, yeah, this guy seems trustworthy. And that becomes even funnier once you know what Goomy actually wants. He pretends to help the minions find monsters for their movie while secretly planning to destroy the world and take over it. The warning was literally in his name. The minions could have saved themselves a whole lot of trouble if someone had simply paused and said, guys, why did he just call himself the Deceiver? Moving on to number 10, there's a little detail near the end of the first solo Minions movie that hits differently once you know where Gru's story goes next. After young Gru pulls off his very first big heist, stealing the Queen of England's crown and making his escape in an aircraft, the narrator sums him up with a very specific choice of words. Gru is described as cunning, evil, perfect, and then comes the one word that really stands out: despicable. Now, if you've seen the Despicable Me movies, that word probably makes you pause, because this isn't just any description. It's the exact word that would eventually become the title of Gru's entire franchise. Was that a deliberate little tease for Despicable Me? It certainly feels fitting, especially since the scene is basically showing us the villain young Gru is becoming. Maybe the filmmakers were planting the seed early, or maybe Gru was simply so terrible that despicable was the only word left in the dictionary. Now let's talk about number 11, because this one is hiding in plain sight. In the first solo Minions movie, there's something oddly American sitting right in the middle of London, and somehow nobody seems bothered by it. During Bob's royal bath, look at what he's happily hugging. 2 bright yellow fire hydrants that look straight out of an American street. And Bob isn't the only one. Later, when Kevin grows into a giant and races through the city to rescue Stuart and Bob, watch as he actually screws a bright red hydrant back into the ground. Here's the problem. Minions is set in London in 1968, but British fire hydrants typically aren't the large, exposed fixtures seen across America. They're generally underground, with small signs marking their locations. So why are these American-style hydrants casually hanging around London? Either London in 1968 had a secret American hydrant phase, or somebody on the animation team was feeling a little too patriotic. On to number 12, which had me connecting a few dots because the more you watch the Minions, the more obvious it becomes that they're not all working with the same amount of brain power. Just look at Kevin. He's usually the one trying to think ahead, keep everyone organized, and figure out what's actually going on. Then we've got Bob, who can turn the simplest situation into a whole emotional experience. And Stewart? Give him a guitar and suddenly whatever everyone else is doing becomes background noise. You see this difference whenever they're all thrown into the same situation. One minion might actually understand what's happening, while another is already somewhere in the background doing something completely unrelated. They can clearly learn, improvise, and figure things out when they need to, but the level of common sense between them? Yeah, wildly inconsistent. It's like the minions were created from the same template, then somebody hit randomize before assigning their personalities. Same species, same goggles, same yellow skin. Completely different operating systems. Coming in at number 13, did you catch this during Kevin, Stewart, and Bob's training with Master Chow in Minions: The Rise of Gru? While the three minions are trying to balance on those vertical logs in the water, Stewart casually opens a bright red lunchbox. And look at the design. There's scarlet overkill on it. Yep, the same scarlet the minions served in the first Minions movie. It's such a random place to sneak her back in that you could easily miss it. Stewart is busy trying not to fall into the water, and apparently his lunchbox is carrying a little piece of Minion history. The wedding scene, the talent show. Those weren't just cute movie moments. Those were full-blown concert-level performances. These little yellow guys were cooking. Here's the theory that actually explains it. Minions have existed since before humans invented music. Not before pop music, before music as a concept, which means for literally all of human history, they've been quietly around absorbing every song, every melody, every genre as it was invented for thousands and thousands of years. By the time you and I are hearing them belted out at a wedding in the 21st century, they've basically had an infinite head start. Of course they don't miss. They've had all of human history as practice. This one will break your brain a little. Go back and actually look at Kevin, Stewart, and Bob. Then look at Margot, Edith, and Agnes. It's the same trio. Kevin's the tall, sensible one, basically the older sibling of the group. That's Margot. Tallest of the three girls, the responsible one. Total nerd energy. Doesn't even try to hide it. Then you've got the babies. Bob never goes anywhere without his teddy bear. Agnes never goes anywhere without a stuffed toy. Coincidence? Sure. Let's go with that. And then there's the chaos agent. Stewart is basically Edith if Edith were yellow, hyper, and communicated exclusively in gibberish. Here's the part that makes it genuinely strange. The first movie's Minion moments happen literal decades before the girls are even born. So Gru somehow adopts three kids who accidentally match the personalities of his three favorite minions. Definitely just a coincidence. Definitely. This is the one that actually keeps me up at night. Every single boss the minions have ever worked for eventually meets an untimely end. Dinosaur? Gone. Caveman? Gone. Napoleon? Also gone. It's basically their brand. So why is Gru still walking around? Easy answer. Plot armor. Boring answer. Here's the real one. Go back to the second Minions movie. This is the youngest a master has ever been when the minions found him. Every boss before Gru saw them as tools, henchmen, staff. Gru was the first one who actually treats them like family, like brothers. But here's the twist. The minions never intentionally hurt any of their old bosses. So it's not like they've got some deadly track record they're actively running on Gru. Something else is going on. And that something else? Gru isn't just despicable. He's a genius. Look at his lab. Look at his gadgets. You really think a man capable of building an actual moon shrinking device wouldn't notice his own employees casually building something catastrophic and step in before it goes sideways? Rank the minions past bosses by IQ. The dinosaur's not winning that contest. The caveman's not winning that contest. Napoleon's got a real shot, until you remember Gru's signature move was stealing the actual moon. The minions are supposed to spend their lives serving the most evil master they can find. Yet, here they are, taking orders from one of their own. Dick really looked around, saw nobody in charge, and basically said, "Fine, I'll do it myself." We finally made it to the last one, and I think I saved one of the best for last. Isn't it funny how the Minions have a history of accidentally sending their bosses to the Deadland, yet Gru somehow escaped the curse? They first meet young Gru in Minions, and by The Rise of Gru, they're already his little henchmen. They stick with them for years, all the way into his adulthood in the Despicable Me movies. And somehow, Gru survives it all. No accidental explosions, no flying off cliffs, no unfortunate life-taking disasters. After wiping out countless masters, the Minions somehow managed to keep Gru alive. So, is Gru just ridiculously lucky? Or did the Minions finally decide, maybe let's not kill this one? There you have it, all the secrets about the Minions. Which fact shocked you the most?